We're talking about Top Chef Season 14, Episode 3, Holds and Clammy Hands. You're listening to Deconstructed, the Top Chef podcast. Welcome to the only podcast that breaks down the food of Top Chef. I'm Sam Chen, and with me is my insatiable co-host, the always hungry Peter Letterman. What's for dinner tonight, Peter?
I'm not sure yet, actually. You have any ideas?
No, but you should definitely braise something and then add an emulsion to it.
I don't think I'm going to braise anything tonight.
I mean, I think the only idea that I came out of this episode was make something with a radish in it. Different forms of radish.
I should make it this evening with different forms of radish.
No.
Unfortunately, I don't have the same access they do to beautiful bushels and bushels of every kind of radish available. I think I have just red radishes at my local supermarket.
There you go. You need to hit up Whole Foods. Come on. I'm just kidding.
I'm not even sure if Whole Foods has that many different varieties of radishes this time of year.
That's fair. Well, this episode will be affectionately named Radish Tattoos for Everyone, because that came up a lot in this episode.
Are you getting a radish tattoo now?
I am not getting a radish tattoo. I am not. I mean, I don't have anything I really love about... I can't... Do you have a food ingredient that you would tattoo?
Do I have a food ingredient I wouldn't tattoo?
Would or wouldn't?
Wouldn't. I think wouldn't. I think I tattoo most foods on my body.
Okay.
I mean, it depends. If it's like a food that I'm really, really into, I might not want to do that because I might end up biting myself.
I like it.
Plus, I want to get like scary tattoos, so I get like a hard-boiled egg because I hate hard-boiled eggs. Like hard-boiled egg and like a flaming skull. That's like that's badass. That's scary.
Yeah. I like your skull, man. Yeah. What's that in there? It's hard-boiled egg.
Yeah, that's a scary part.
Okay. So before we get into the exciting one-on-one showdown challenge that we had for our elimination, let's talk about the quickfire, which was a mise-en-place challenge. So this week's quickfire was basically they had to break down 3 artichokes. I think it was 2 quarts or a quart or whatever of onions chopped.
It was 2 quarts of onions. It looked like.
Yeah. So like some amount of minced garlic. It might have been like 5 like full like heads of garlic. What else? Shrimp needed to be prepped, and then a certain amount of clams.
Clams, exactly.
Right. And then like the twist was basically the team that did it first would be able to stop the other team from working on things for 3 minutes, and they had 25 minutes total to both prepare the mise-en-place and then
cook the dish all at once, because we've seen them do this kind of competition before, but the dish came afterwards. I think the dish came from the losers who had to sort of cook for their lives to stay on the show.
Yeah, that's what it was. And then more importantly, like most of the time when they do the mise-en-place, it's a relay. It is not a like team effort. In this case, it was like once you're done, you go help someone else.
Right, so this really was a team effort. It was blue team versus green team.
Right.
It wasn't more individuals.
Right, which I think is like was the problem behind the strategy that they approached it with. I think what ended up happening was when they finished theirs, they went on to another one that they could like help the most. The problem was it actually was a timing thing, right? So if clams end up taking the longest, which it did for both, everyone should go on clams because I can trust the next guy to get garlic by the time the clams are done.
Right, especially when it's going to come down to the clams. That's true. You always jump on the task that's going to be the hardest.
Right.
To get that done first.
Yeah. If it's a numbers game for some reason, then I could see like hitting the next one that was closest. Like if you scored additional points for being the second done.
If you got points for completing each round faster than the other team, then it would make sense to jump onto the next one. It doesn't make any sense to do that though if you just need to get the whole thing done.
Right. And so basically the team of Brooke, Shirley, Jim, Jamie. I'm reading here.
Did they keep
Emily,
the same teams?
They did.
Between the quickfire and the elimination?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, they did. So basically, the team that ended up winning ended up being the one that had the 3-minute penalty. And so instead of going for whatever they were going to do with clams, whatever technique, which I think was poaching, they were going to poach, they went with frying.
And for all you know, that poaching could have turned out terribly.
Yeah. I mean, they are two... I think that's the interesting part is it felt like what they did is they swapped out frying and poaching. It didn't sound like they completely redesigned what they were going to make.
And I think that it may have worked to their advantage.
Yeah.
I think that the difference in textures by frying it really made that a winning dish.
Exactly.
And you know, when in doubt, deep fry.
Yeah.
It's going to be good.
Yeah. Our lesson from last week, add more fat.
Yeah. And especially with the freshness and the acidity you get from an artichoke, to do that with something that's going to be fried and a little bit on the fatty side, that just looks like a delicious dish. Because now you're getting fattiness, you're getting crispiness, and you're getting something fresh and citrusy on top. It's just a nice dish.
Right. You know, and it's Shirley and Brooke cooking. Like,
right.
So far this season,
they're the power couple.
Yeah. Solid team. And then the losing one was a stuffed clam with shrimp, fresh herbs, and all this other stuff.
Mind you, also looks delicious.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, so I'm not going to give that too hard of a time. The fried artichoke looked really nice on that. That's what I think would have taken over the edge for me. I'm not a big fan of stuffed clams in general. Mm-hmm. You know, Chris Cosentino was saying that he grew up with them in New England, and I did too. I always found most of the ones that we ate in New England to be really bready. Just kind of these, like, you know, doughy, like, viscous. It's just not a very good thing. You don't taste the freshness of the clam. You lose the salinity. You lose everything, and all you taste is like seasoned breadcrumbs.
And I think that's like, I think that's a reflection of how kind of we've evolved in this country from a food perspective. Is that we start to associate food value with portion size, and so like I feel like those are a lot of shortcuts that get taken when you're just trying to like make it look a little bit bigger,
yeah,
or
of course,
like, fill you up a little bit more. Whereas, you know, like the best food experiences I've had, like portion didn't matter. Like it was always I wanted more, but it wasn't like, man, that portion size was super small. It was like, this was really good, I want more.
I think it's exactly how things like that started. I think like in like the 50s and the 40s when you started getting a lot of these Italian American places opening up, and they need to stretch their budget a little further for the American audience that wanted to get, you know, pasta as a side dish, you know, not as its own dish. They just wanted more for their money. They wanted more food. More was better. You ended up having people thin out the fresh flavored clams with more and more breadcrumbs. I mean, I guarantee you, if you get any kind of baked clam dish in southern Italy, it's not just going to be a massive breadcrumbs with a tiny bit of chopped up clams. Yeah. Clams are probably going to be a forefront of the dish.
Yeah, I will say this. The one thing that I really liked about this dish, which was just a very random thing, is the fact that there was a grilled lemon on the side.
Really nice. When you grill a lemon, you bring out the caramelization. You bring out any kind of sugars that are in that lemon out, so it becomes a little bit more of a deep flavor rather than just that cloyingly sour.
Yeah, it's a deeper flavor, and it's like really easy to get the juice out of it too. Mm-hmm. And that's the other like really good part. And I didn't have this until I finally like went to a restaurant that cooked fish well, and they just served it with it. And I was really, really impressed with how that brought out flavors.
I never really thought about getting the juice out too. I guess it would, because it breaks down a lot of the cellular structure right when you slice the lemon.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was a nice looking dish. I mean, you'll get me any time when you put fried artichokes on anything, especially when they're fried artichokes that haven't been breaded or something, because artichokes themselves fry up really well, just like potato chips or something. So you get a very crispy result from an artichoke. Sometimes people will bread them, and that completely defeats the purpose. Then you're left with this sort of moist thing in the middle around too thick of breading. You want the artichoke itself to be crispy, and they went right ahead and did that.
Yeah, that's just like a lazy way out.
It is.
The artichoke when you're frying it.
Done by the same kind of people who put too many breadcrumbs in their stuffed clams.
That's right. No more breadcrumbs, guys. So moving on to the elimination challenge. This week's elimination challenge was interesting. It was kind of my favorite type, which was the like 1v1 heads up kind of challenge.
That's my favorite too.
But the nice twist to it was also part of the team, right? So the idea was that if you won as a team, even if you lost your individual dish, you were still safe, and vice versa.
But it didn't really seem to matter on this episode anyway, because everyone made a great dish. So there wasn't anyone who ended up safe who made a bad dish.
Exactly.
In fact, I think everyone who was safe and on that team wouldn't have gone home anyway.
No. I absolutely agree. So obviously, you know, there's definitely needs to be a shout out to Brooke for her dessert, because she had the seventh dish, and she ended up winning with a purple daikon panna cotta with sour pineapple. And
I mean, when you see the reactions to both their desserts, they're overwhelmingly positive. Yeah. I mean, you know, I think they had a hard time deciding who was going to win in that dessert round. And once again, Sylvia's look tasty, kind of boring, I guess, especially. I guess just boring when comparing it to Brooks. I mean, look at how beautiful that dish is.
It's beautiful. There's complexity to it. I'm sure, like, by the way, I didn't know white chocolate Pop Rocks were a thing. Like, where could I get that?
I don't think they are a thing. I think they're a thing from Brooks' mind.
Yeah. Like, I want in on that. I want in
a lot of things she did. I've never had a dessert that had thinly sliced radishes on top of it. I mean, how cool is that? And how cool is that bringing the main ingredient right to the forefront of the dish as well?
Yeah.
That is a really awesome dessert. And it's so enticing looking. It's really, really cool. And when I first heard panna cotta, I kind of thought it was going to be kind of boring.
Yeah.
How good can a panna cotta... I mean, panna cotta is delicious, don't get me wrong, but, like, how good is this going to be?
Well, and I think that's the thing, is when it's, like, when you have a, like, okay panna cotta, you're just like, all right, it was okay.
Right.
But when you have, like, a good one, you're like, I could eat a lot more of this.
Right, but just panna cotta to me says every single restaurant menu, basically. You know, every single Italian restaurant menu has panna cotta on it.
Sure, but getting it right is not the same thing.
Well, that's my point. She did it perfectly. She elevated that to, like, a level that it needed to be on to make a panna cotta a winning dish on Top Chef.
Right.
Especially when it's going up against another dish that they liked quite a bit.
Right. And so that dish was Sylvia's dish, who... To be fair, to your credit, you did call out for being like, well, we're not seeing her cook again.
We're not seeing her cook again. She's making a dessert. And she's also making a dessert that her family's made for a long time and, you know, this and that. I still don't think her food's very exciting.
Right, but I would argue that the difference of being able to introduce daikon in a relatively, like, novel way into a cake is not without skill.
But does this showcase daikon? I guess that's more my question. Does this showcase the radish, or is it just kind of masking the radish?
I'd have to taste it, I guess. Right?
I guess you would have tasted it. And I'm sure actually
we don't know what went into basically, you know.
Daikon is the blandest of the radishes. So that's sort of where I take away some points. She didn't make a spicy radish cake. She didn't make anything that was particularly exciting of radish cake. She used basically like the dragon fruit of radishes and then use other flavors to make it very nice. And I would think it almost kind of masked it in a way. I might have something out for Sylvia for whatever reason. Yeah. I don't know why. I guess I'm just annoyed in that first pasta being bland still. But
hey, she didn't underseason this one.
You know, I'll give her this credit. The best cake that I think I've almost ever had made, there's a cake sort of like this, was a cake that Chris Cosentino made himself.
Mm-hmm.
And the crumb was perfect. Everything was great on it. It was an olive oil cake. If Chris Cosentino said her crumb was great and said the structure of the cake's great and all these things, which it does, it looks amazing.
Right.
I'm going to go with that. This may have been one of the best tasting cakes ever. In fact, for me, just thinking about what she put in this cake, I would probably love this cake.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So let's move on to the non-dessert portion of this elimination challenge. Let's start with Shirley's dish, which was a beef braised daikon with misshaped pasta, aka she got lazy at some point. And that's what she says in the episode. I'm not just criticizing her. She was just like, I didn't want to do this way, so I'm going to just misshape it.
Yeah, she told it like it was.
Yeah. So the one thing I wanted to start out with in this was talking about braising, right? So how about you give a brief explanation of what braising is as a technique? Because it came up a couple of times in this episode. I'm not sure everyone really understands it.
So braising is kind of two techniques in one. It's allowing you to cook meat at two different heats and getting the best of both worlds. So basically, braising, you're cooking you're cooking your meat or you're cooking your vegetable, I guess, because they're braising radishes too at this point. Yeah. You're cooking at a high heat, usually to sear it off, and then you're going to cook it at a low heat for a long time with some kind of liquid, with a braising liquid, to introduce moisture back into it and a lot of flavor back into the meat.
Sure.
You'll do this a lot with proteins that need to break down over time, like short ribs or things of that nature. You can't just sort of cook at a high heat once. They won't be juicy. They won't be tender. They'll just be hard as a rock. So you want to just break down all the proteins over time and introduce a lot of flavor to whatever you're cooking. It's interesting to do with something like radishes, because a radish is almost like a sponge in a lot of ways. It'll absorb a lot of flavor, especially if you cook it over a long time. Some of the best things I've ever had with radishes actually were braised radish dishes, like the Japanese make up a pork belly and radish stew called kakuni. Mm-hmm. It's delicious, and it gets braised and cooked for hours and hours and hours. And when you're eating this radish that's in it, the daikon that's in it, it's flavorful the entire way through the radish. It is really, really delicious and a great way to do radishes.
Yeah, I think one thing that I liked about having this elimination challenge and it highlighting something that was a vegetable versus, I think Silva tried to predict that it was going to be some sort of offal, because I guess Chris is known for his like nose to tail or whatever he wants to call it. I think a lot of people don't really get the chance to have good vegetable dishes, right? Vegetables in American cuisine tend to be a side dish and not really elevated to a like a real something meaningful within a dining experience.
Vegetables can be very, very unforgiving, and they are quite difficult to cook. They're difficult to prep. They're very intimidating for your average cook. When you go to a store and you're looking at what you can cook for dinner, you see pre-prepared meats. You see, chicken cutlets that have already been butchered. You can find pre-prepped vegetables, all kinds of things. If you want to make vegetables a star, that means starting out with vegetables that haven't been processed in many ways. And for a lot of people, that's just a lot to ask. So I think we don't see a lot of that in our average kitchens just because that's not how people are used to cooking. It's not a convenient way to cook.
Yeah, and I think the other thing is, like, at least when I was growing up, my parents would kind of compare how cuisine here would differ from, like, Chinese cuisine, partially by highlighting the availability and the cost of meat versus vegetables. Whereas in China, vegetables are generically very cheap. Meat is generically very expensive. Where I think in the U.S., especially when you talk about fresher ingredients and nicer ingredients, that kind of flips backwards.
It absolutely does.
Per pound, more or less, or even kind of for how much caloric value you can get in a dish, the meat will stand out more in America than it would elsewhere in the world. I think that definitely drives it that way.
There are a lot of inner city food deserts still in this country that just don't have access to good produce. And the difference is that our very poor communities in this country are from inner cities, a lot of them. And in other countries like China, it's still rural. So
Right.
the poor are living in China are living on the fields that are growing the vegetables that are in the rice fields, are in the places that are actually getting the produce first. Whereas here, it's the places that are getting the produce last. So I think we have a very different tradition of eating vegetables first. And we also have a very different tradition of where we find food sources. There was a lot of Chinese families when I was living in Brooklyn who would actually cut down the weeds in their front yard and would using that to cook with lots of different greens.
Yeah.
The Greeks do it too with like dandelion greens or things like that. But they were actually cutting the weeds in the front of their buildings in Brooklyn to use them for cooking. That's not something that a Western, especially an American audience, would ever think of doing.
Yeah.
So vegetables tend to take a lot of a back seat in our meals, and as a result, we don't give them the attention they deserve. My wife hated Brussels sprouts her entire life, but that's because her mother boiled them to death growing up. And then when I started cooking Brussels sprouts at high heat, roasting them, or let's be honest, frying them, it became a very different thing for her because I was taking this vegetable and treating it in a way that specific vegetable should be treated, realizing that not all vegetables are the same.
Right.
And I think that's why we also lose a lot of vegetables as being the showpiece, because you need to have a lot of knowledge for how different vegetables cook, which is different than meat. A lot of meat, you cook it at a high heat, something, as long as you time it well and you get the right temperature, very similar processes to cooking meat and making it tasty. Vegetables are totally different. Every vegetable is a different ballgame.
Yep, absolutely. So, kind of moving on from the vegetable dish that Shirley made, I kind of want to talk about Jamie's dish. And Jamie did a braised French breakfast radish with a red miso emulsion.
You're right, by the way. I'm noticing how many things were braised tonight.
Yeah. There's a lot of braised things. And so, I'll say this. When he brought out this dish, I thought it was one of those, like, I'm not lazy. Like he tried to make it seem more complex than it was, and so I was certain that he was not going to get kudos for this one. Then it turned out they loved it and they thought it was great, and I kind of ate my words. So, what stands out to you about this dish on what the judges saw in it?
Well, I kind of like how simple it seems and how simple it looks. I think I liken the colors to looking like a nice coat. It's just kind of browns and hunter greens. But you know what?
Much like the coat you're wearing now.
Much like the coat I'm wearing now. But you know what? It does. It brings out a lot of those terroir colors, the things that the radish would actually come from naturally, which is kind of nice with a radish. This dish, although it looks simple, I'm sure there's so much compounded flavor in that red miso emulsion. I'm sure that's what brightened everything up. Again, when I was talking about Sheldon's a couple weeks ago, making that big bowl of flavor as he was describing it, I'm sure this sauce had so much flavor to it that it didn't matter that the components were all relatively simple. It was just a radish and a little bit of a sauce. That sauce was probably so complex and so complementary to the braised radish that I think that's why they really liked it. Again, it's hard to say without tasting it.
Right.
But I'm assuming that was the case.
Right. So let's talk a little bit about emulsions real quick and how they work and more importantly, what you might see in something like, or how people can use it in a way to lighten or to brighten up dishes and add kind of different complexity to their dish.
Well, an emulsion, just in its very basic nature, is just the process that you are taking two liquids that shouldn't go with each other, like let's say an acid that's water-based and an oil, and turning them into one cohesive thing. So a vinaigrette and anything of that nature. So, if you were going to make a Caesar salad dressing, the way that you're able to combine the acid and the oil is by using an egg yolk. So a lot of times to combine things, we use a fat. So egg yolk, you can use a little bit of mayonnaise even. In fact, a lot of times when I'm going to do a salad dressing that's going to be an emulsion, I use a little bit of mayonnaise instead of an egg yolk.
Right.
Gives a little bit more creaminess. But same thing. The reason it works is because there's egg in the mayonnaise. Emulsions are just they're going to provide a lot of flavor. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. You're blending oils, so you're giving something a viscosity so that it can actually coat things well, and also mild that flavor, the acid well, and round it out. And an acid, and probably some salt, and a little bit of fat. So again, we're just getting basically flavor in. Emulsions are going to have more concentrated flavor than a sauce usually.
Right.
And I think that's why we have just this plate with a little tiny bit of sauce and braised radishes, but they're an emulsion. They're not in a sauce necessarily. This isn't meant to be something that carries out a quantity. It's meant to be something that carries out a quantity of flavor in a small package.
Exactly. And I think that's the best part that comes through in a lot of these, because I think it's probably easier for a lot of people if we just explain everything as a sauce. But understanding the complexity of Top Chef and where techniques actually do come in, I think that becomes kind of an important part within all of this, is to understand that it's more than just that. So what were some of your favorite dishes from this week?
That's a good question. I would have to go John Tizar's dish, that ramen. The look on everyone's face of the broth that he had made. He lost, I think. Did he lose?
He did lose.
But you know what? He pulled off a great ramen broth. And he pulled off a great ramen broth under really tough time constraints, under a lot of stress.
Oh, no, sorry. He did win. He won.
Oh, he did win? Okay. Well, he deserved it then. Because to create a good ramen broth, especially when the people who are probably very seasoned eating ramen broths in that amount of time, is pretty great. I mean, people spend their whole lives trying to perfect their ramen broths. And that did look really nice, really simple, really elegant. And to elevate it with that radish hot sauce is really cool. Really, really cool. Very inventive. I don't know. I like John's dish a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I think the one thing that calls out with John's dish that I didn't like, and I think this is what Tom said, was basically it's a nice ramen. It's complex. The flavors are good, but does it really bring out the radish a lot? I think the oil does bring it back.
I agree with that. That's
but
true.
He also didn't serve it. The oil was on the side. He didn't put it in there. He didn't, he was just like, if you want a little spice, you can add this in.
That is very true. He used the radish quite as much as a condiment, although he did make that really nice radish custard that's in there. I think he cubed up and put it in there, right?
Oh, yeah. No, I think it was a tofu.
There was a tofu? Okay, I was thinking that was like a radish custard he had made. All right, if that's the case, then yeah, it's definitely missing a little bit of the radish. But that hot sauce is so cool, though.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, did he use anything else to make it spicy other than the heat from the radish, or was he?
I'm guessing he might have used a little bit, but I think it probably stood a lot more out on its own, because otherwise I don't think they would have given it to him if he had just mixed some hot sauce and stuck some radish flavor in it.
Right. I know the other dish I want to give a shout out to, actually was one of the top ones, was Silva's dish. Not Sylvia, Silva. That just, what a gorgeous looking dish. That looks like something that I would be served at a 2-3 Michelin star restaurant and be very happy with it.
Right.
Which makes sense. He made a really good seafood dish that was very flavor forward, and his mentor is Jean-Georges.
Yeah.
This is a very Jean-Georges-y kind of dish.
Exactly.
Sort of Asian inspired, North African flavors. Combining the world's flavors into one cohesive dish. This is like the UN of dishes, but presented in such a simple, elegant way.
Yeah.
That it just is a really, really nice looking thing.
Which is, and I think that's the thing that calls out, right? So you have like a North African spiced halibut served with some radish, and then served with a dashi braised daikon radish.
Right.
Which, like, I don't know if I could even imagine how, like, the deepness of those two flavors would mix well, but it had to have worked.
It's North Africa by way of Japan. This is not kitschy, obvious fusion food. This is understanding worldly flavors and how they can work together. Since I said this, I think on the first episode, this is definitely a guy to watch.
Yeah.
I think he was trained by the best. I think he has good ideas in his own head. I think Silva's dish really encompasses what it means to be a great world chef, not just a great local chef.
Yeah, and I think this is where you see how the show starts to vary. Remember, so like the first episode of the podcast, I said something along the lines of the show would be so different if instead of starting something right away, you had 5 minutes to think about it, right? And to me, this is kind of how you look at the concept of if you give them a confined box, it's actually easier for them to explore and to figure out how different flavors are going to go together and make a good dish. Whereas when you say you can make anything you want, people will get paralyzed. And I think that's why, like, the finale works so well when it does happen, is that there's a break between the last episode and the finale. So the finale is usually a, like, cook what you want within very loose confines, right? Like, it should be inspired by the food of the area, but it's your food, right? And they have time to prep for that. They have months to prep for that, theoretically. And so that's where I see, like, Silva shining a little bit better, is instead of, like, make whatever you want, it's, okay, make this within this box. And he's like, okay, let me think about the things that work using those ingredients.
Some people who are really genius in any field that they're in will have a really hard time when you tell them do whatever, and this is a small amount of time you have to do it, because they have so many things going on in their brain at any given time. Their brains are flying a mile a minute. So yeah, if you're gonna tell them do whatever food you want and there's no constraint to it, give them some time to prep, and then you'll probably get something great, because they'll be able to break down their thoughts, list everything out. If you're going to tell them do something on the spot and you want the best result, give them a bunch of constraints so their brain can just sort of slow down and not have all the thoughts at once and focus on that one dish they're going to make. That has to be based on something that you thought it should be based on. And I think that's why we got such a great dish from Silva this week. I agree.
Yeah. All right. So let's talk about some of the dishes that maybe weren't so hot. Before we move on to Sam's kind of at the bottom, because I think both of us can really talk about banh mi for a pretty decent amount of time. Which ones do you think?
I can also eat banh mi for a decent amount of time.
I know. One of the banh mi shops here has got, like, the buy 5 get the 6th free, like, and it's like $10 total, baby, like $12.
Oh, I know that banh mi shop.
Oh, so good.
I don't know if we can legally do shout outs on podcasts, but yeah, my wife likes their coffee.
Yeah. If you're in Vegas, go ahead and hit us up.
So that's something I did not realize when I first moved out here, was how much banh mi this town has.
Yeah.
This is more banh mi than any town I've ever been in. Mm-hmm. I mean, like, there's banh mi place after banh mi place after banh mi place, and they're all pretty delicious.
Yeah.
Just got to go when you see that hot sign outside. The hot baguettes. The baguettes are fresh from the oven.
All right. Let's talk about something else before we hop into the banh mi. Before we hop into the banh mi. So I know you weren't a huge fan of BJ's dish. So let's talk about BJ's dish, which was the pink radish conserva with trout. Not that I know what a conserva is. What did you think about that dish?
Does BJ stand for Boring Joe? So here's the thing, man. BJ's food looks really nice. BJ's food looks really nice, like it should be in a culinary magazine. BJ's food looks about as basic B word as you get, though, because it all looks like something that someone who loves brunch and loves their bae would like a lot. I don't know. It's hard to describe it. Nothing about it wows me. It comes almost from BJ's personality, too. I'm so unique. I'm a chef who's covered in tattoos and drink whiskey and like that kind of stuff. It's not. I've seen it a million times. I came here from Brooklyn. He is like the epitome of the urban hipster chef who locally sources his ingredients, likes to tell you about how they locally source their ingredients, but then doesn't cut his radish thin enough.
Right. I think that ends up being the problem I have with BJ. Like, nothing more than this episode really called out to me the fact that he is relatively bland as a chef. Like, and that's where, like, if I compare him to someone like Sylvia, where I don't think she's bland, I think she maybe has some kinks to work out. But let's look. All right, it's been 2 times cooking, at least for him, where he still really doesn't understand the timing. It was a hot mess at the end, where he was just like needed other people's help to really, really execute. And he was just like, "Oh, it doesn't matter. It'll taste fine. It'll taste good. That's the flavor's all that counts." It's like it's kind of like when people talk about being messy in the kitchen, right? It's not that like having a mess in the kitchen is a really, really horrible thing. It's that most chefs that are not organized enough to be clean at their workstation have other deficiencies. And I think that's what you see with BJ.
Yeah, I think his biggest deficiency is just being boring.
Yeah.
A conserva, do you know what conserva is?
No.
A conserva is a fancy word for saying canned vegetables. Canned preserved vegetables. First of all, I don't even know how he did that in a few hours. That's weird. So it's probably something that isn't really conserva. They're just calling conserva because it's a nice fancy word that will, get everyone wet who reads Saveur magazine. It's just still so boring. It's a bunch of pretty vegetables on a plate. There's nothing exciting. There's nothing like new about this. It's nothing that I haven't seen a million times at nice farm-to-table restaurants.
Exactly. I think, and this is where
it's safe.
Yeah. I think this is where it goes back to one of the conversations we've had, not necessarily on the show, about the difference between like foodies and foodies who like actually like to cook and actually make food. And I think that's kind of the highlight, is that this type of dish, his type of cooking, probably appeals to people who like are foodies because they like try a bunch of different things or go to different places that people tell them are good, not necessarily because they like.
So I completely agree with that. I think the second thing you said hits it on the head. It's for foodies who go places because other foodies have told them that's a good place to go. It's not for foodies who go to the worst neighborhood in town and find the most authentic place on their own to try to then take that flavor and incorporate it into their own food. This is for foodies who need to be told what good food is. It's for boring foodies. That sounds mean, but it is absolutely for the brunch foodie.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so I don't know if anything else really called out as a huge negative. Obviously, because as we heard in this episode, everyone had really good dishes. I actually really like the fact that when it went to the bottom 4, they basically were like, well, it's not Sylvia and it's not Casey because their dishes were all good. Like,
yeah, and even Jim, who at first I thought was making a boring dish, he made an oyster emulsion. That's so cool.
Yeah.
Everyone made a good dish.
Yeah.
Oh, do you know who didn't make a good dish?
Who?
Annie. She claimed that her panzanella was a panzanella when it wasn't actually.
What? You know what? She didn't claim her dish wasn't what it was this week. She didn't overcook anything.
No, she didn't do any of those things.
Everything came out on time.
Wait, and why didn't she do those things, Sam?
Because she's out.
She's out.
That being said, I haven't watched last.
Sorry, how many episodes of this show are there this season?
There'll probably be 13 by the end of it.
All right, so you do know that for 13 episodes of this show, I will be bringing up Annie's panzanella salad.
Great.
All right, so what are we moving on to?
Well, let's talk about the bottom really
one
first, and then we'll talk about everything else. So Sam went home this week for his radish banh mi. which was served over like a brioche, sort of. Let me pull it up real quick once I can find him, which is weird because he's very tall.
While you look for that, do you want me to already tell you what I think's wrong with it?
Sure.
Because I can't wait to tell you that.
Yeah.
Why would you call that a radish banh mi? That's so weird. That's like serving a cheeseburger and saying, with the cheeseburger on it, with the burger and the cheese, but calling it a lettuce burger because there's lettuce on it. That's really weird. I didn't really understand what he was doing. I guess he's inverted it, so where the radish is now the star of the show,
right,
and the chicken is backing it up.
Right.
But why not make a crispy chicken banh mi, a crispy chicken skin banh mi with radish?
Yeah, I get that. I think this is one of those situations where at some point in his head, he got the idea that he needed to make a banh mi. And then he thought, well, shit, if I just give them a banh mi, like if I just give them a traditional banh mi, even if you change up the protein part of it, like it wasn't going to be enough. So
I
he
don't
tried
want
to
a
get
radish
like
banh mi, though.
No, I agree. So he
That's a
tried to
problem.
get overly creative with it.
But he's overly creative and now named something that I don't want to eat because I don't want a lettuce burger.
No, I agree. I mean, that's the thing. They said it right on the show, which is the point that I completely wholeheartedly agree with, which is like the baguette's there for a reason. Like you take that out, like why are you calling it a banh mi? And that's what I love about banh mi's is that the bread is important, that there's the crispy freshness of it throughout the entire.
All right, correct me if I'm wrong here, because I'm a little rusty on my Vietnamese.
Yeah.
Doesn't banh mean bread?
Yeah.
Isn't like banh mi just like mean like bread sandwich basically?
Yeah.
So like that is the main focus. Like what I was saying before, so I probably spoiled this a little bit because I probably should have brought this up now rather than earlier in our show. The best part about going to the banh mi place in Las Vegas is when the hot sign is on.
Yeah.
When you're getting the hot bread. Because the biggest difference between any banh mi place is the bread. It's not the fillings. All the fillings are fine. You know, they're kind of like fatty chickens and different things, always with the same topping. So again, always with the same toppings. Mind you, those toppings in banh mi are pickled cucumber, pickled carrot, cilantro, and what's the other one? Oh, pickled radish. So it's not like he's doing something special. Again, this is calling it a lettuce burger. He's not putting the radish is always on the banh mi. He's just taken the condiment and made it the forefront thing, which again is kind of weird.
Yeah.
But it's all those things, right? So it's those pickled vegetables. They're usually pretty similar. Some places I like more because the things are shredded smaller than others or vice versa. Yeah. And you get some kind of salty, sweet meat in the middle of some kind.
See, and that's the interesting thing. I could have seen a version of this now that we're talking about it where he did some sort of braised radish.
Yeah.
And put it in there.
The braised radish would have made more sense, actually, than trying to do like the same fresh pickled radish. Because a braised radish would have mimicked having that deep, salty meat flavor.
Exactly.
But here's the thing. All those things are superfluous. You could stick anything you want in a banh mi, right? Put a hamburger in a banh mi. It comes down to the baguette. That is the most important part of a banh mi. So he's done, what he should have called this was like a Vietnamese salad on top of brioche or something.
So a Vietnamese panzanella.
Oh my God, this is a Vietnamese panzanella. Sam has made a Vietnamese panzanella.
Winning.
It's not actually a panzanella, but he can call it that because apparently you can do that on this show. Actually, you can't. You can't. You get sent home for that.
And that's what happened.
Actually, Gerald got sent home that episode.
That's true. That's true. All right, great. So let's move on to our favorite part of the week, the chef testant of the week, where we talk about the chef testant that amused us the most this week. Surprise, surprise, it wasn't Emily. She had no part of this.
Emily had no part of this show. There's no drama. There was really nothing.
Oh,
from
believe
Emily.
me, I tried to go back and I was like, what did she make? What did she do?
Emily just kind of
she
blended
what?
in the background.
What the hell? Like,
I had to ask you later before we recorded what she even made. I barely even remember what her dish was.
Yeah.
No, it's not going to be Emily. Emily faded into the background a bit.
So mine is definitely Katsuji because he is
the instigator.
He is now shown more colors as an instigator. And then you watch him fuck up a little bit. It is very amusing.
So I really like Katsuji this episode because one, he poked fun at himself for not knowing how to do the clams. I like people who are self-aware. He knows he's being a bit of a jackanape. And the thing is, he's a bit of a bullshit talker, things like that, but then he backs it up.
Yeah.
He's not just playing a game and then gets by in it because he played the game. He's getting by because he's playing the game, having some fun, but he's also making kick-ass food to back it up with. That little enchilada he made, or enchilada in quotation marks, as he did, was so elegant and smart. I can't give this guy a hard time anymore, and I totally understand why you would make him your chef tessin of the week. Yeah, really, that dish, we're looking at it now, but that enchilada he made was so elevated. It really was. It was a Michelin star enchilada.
Yeah, I wouldn't
Looked
doubt it.
really, really delicious. And Katsuji knows he's doing good food.
Right.
At first, I didn't think Chris Cosentino liked him a lot because he was giving lots of shout outs to Sheldon for Sheldon helping everyone and then to Katsuji. Because I'm sure Katsuji's a little bit of a shit off camera.
Oh, yeah,
But
definitely.
he really
And
pulled
on
together
camera.
the food. He pulled together so much that Chris Cosentino, who I thought was giving him the cold shoulder, actually gave him the win for his round.
Right.
So, big fan of Katsuji. That's your pick?
That's my pick.
All right, my pick's going to be... Oh, this one's tough. BJ.
Okay.
No, BJ is not my top pick. No, not even
I
close.
can't imagine it would be.
I'm giving my top pick to... Brooke's too obvious for me.
Yeah.
Brooke was the winner for sure. Casey, surprised she didn't win, also kind of blended into the background. I was about to give it to her because I really like what she did with that,
I know.
scallop.
Well, and I think that was another situation of like she went up against Silva, who just kind of knocked it out a little bit.
Yeah. I don't know. Do I not have a chef testing of the
so
week
if you
this
want
week?
to take Katsuji,
You're gonna
I've
have to
got
help
my,
me with this
I've
one,
got my
actually.
honorable mention. My honorable mention is actually Sylvia, and I'll say this: like I was really, really amused by when Sam at the end was like, "You just need the Padma. You just say it all in Italian. She's gonna love you. It's gonna be great," and like that kind of happened. But what I really saw was like her mixture of like her personality with her cooking, and where her personality isn't as Katsuji, but I get it now. I understand it a little bit better.
All right. You know what? I can't believe this. I'm about to do something I didn't think I was going to do on this entire season. I'm giving Chef Tessin of the Week to Sylvia.
There you go.
I agree with you. She pulled a Shirley Chung this week.
Ooh.
Do you know what I mean by pulling a Shirley Chung? She took a dish that she's really comfortable with, that she grew up with, that she knows is amazing. That's so close to her heart. Something that her mom made for her when she came home from college every year. And she put an elevated twist on it.
Yeah.
She didn't completely reinvent the wheel. She didn't let her ego as a chef get the best of her. She pulled from great tradition of cooking and then elevated it. And like I've said in the past episodes, that is my favorite thing for these chefs to do.
Yeah.
It is the reason I love Shirley.
Yeah.
So you know what? Fine. I will give the nod to Sylvia, but it's like a probationary nod.
Well, yeah, because it was a dessert.
Right. She's kind of on academic probation because she's transferred in from a lesser school and really needs to prove herself still.
There you go. That's fine. All right, so let's move on to predictions. So what's your prediction for who's going to go home next? I think this week, again, I pre-watched the episodes. You watched them live before the show. You did not think Sam was going to go home.
I did not think Sam was going to go home.
You were a little bit off, but this was a very interesting episode because we saw a lot of people do really great things. Based on that, who do you think is going home next?
Well, I've been saying Sylvia. I'm not saying Sylvia anymore.
Ooh.
I'm not saying Sylvia anymore. BJ is mine to go home.
Yeah.
BJ's food's going to keep getting more and more boring. Right. BJ is the kind of guy whose restaurant probably has an outline picture of a pig and places where you would butcher it.
Yep.
He is that exact chef. I guarantee you he has that tattoo. So BJ's going home. The other chefs are so inventive this season, so creative, and are also so skilled and so focused. We saw that on this episode. There was no major drama on this episode. Everyone just got their job done and made great food. The person who's going to go home next is going to be the person who makes uninspired food. And the most uninspired food I've seen so far has been from BJ and maybe Sylvia, but Sylvia really redeemed herself this week. So I'm going with BJ.
Yeah, I think BJ is a good call. I think my pick, and it's more of like, we're in Vegas. I'm rolling the dice here, right? So my pick is probably Amanda. And I'll tell you why. John Tazar hit it right on the head during the episode. He was just like, she's got this kind of like crazy, like frantic energy. And either it's going to be amazing or it's going to be a flop. And I think that's probably what we'll see from her every week.
That is a very good point. She is definitely not a Shirley or a Brooke who are like so focused. And even John, these guys are so incredibly focused. You can't imagine them getting shook. I can see John making something bad.
Right.
Kind of getting his own head and making something bad, but I can't see him while he's making it being in any way shaken. He will still do it confidently and effortlessly. Amanda's already had she admitted a career change too.
Right.
So she's a little bit of a shaken person.
Yeah. Which I think brings like a nice energy to this, right? She got really far into her season, so clearly she has the chops for it. It's just like whether she's got it, like whether the physical and the mental are gonna like be okay.
Right.
And I think that's why I think I think every week there's going to be like a 50% chance Amanda's going to go home. And it's just going to be like random.
Yeah, Amanda is definitely going to be riding the tightrope for the rest of this season for sure.
Right. All right, so let's move on to the recipe of the week. So Peter, what do you have for us this week?
Well, radishes kind of intimidate me. I'm not going to lie. So I'm going to go to a semi-classic, something that I enjoy, a take on a semi-classic, I should say, which is a Japanese daikon stew of sorts. So what we're going to do is we're going to braise some daikon, a little bit of dark meat chicken, shimeji mushrooms, and that's all going to be in a dashi butter broth. So I think we'll get a lot of that really good umami flavor that, Sheldon always likes to talk about, and a nice simple dish that we can recreate. And daikon is relatively available for most of us too. So something nice so you can make at home that's not too hard. And it will be a very nice elevation of the humble radish.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that sounds great, especially the melding of all these flavors.
I was considering being really lazy and doing my favorite radish dish, which is just good fresh radishes and good French butter. Have you ever had that?
No.
Delicious. Not April Bloomfield. Gabrielle Hamilton does it at a restaurant, Prune. She just serves you a bowl of half-cut radishes with a stem still on, nice, good farm fresh radishes, and a bowl of soft French butter and a pinch bowl of salt. And it is the nicest way to start a meal.
Nice. That's great. That's great. Yeah, I think that could be amazing. I think it's weird to think about how simple certain things can be and still taste amazing.
Yeah.
Because we're used to like, I feel like we've invented a whole nother language just to describe food to make it sound like it tastes better.
As long as it's not the only thing you're eating. So many cultures have these great traditions of serving lots and lots of very simple things on a table. And all those things together become almost like a dish unto itself.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's another interesting thing, and we'll wrap this up right after this. But I had the pleasure of being at Next, which is Grant Atchett's like test sort of restaurant. But by the way, December next year is inspired by the top 50 restaurants from the world, which just sounds like it's going to be the most amazing thing ever. But I was there for like tapas, which was really good how they did it. But the thing I never understood, because not growing up in that culture, is that tapas wasn't a lot of small dishes in one restaurant. It was the idea of like going out to multiple restaurants
from restaurant to restaurant, and getting the different specialties at the different restaurants.
And I think that's another one of these things that comes out in this type of food, and in the difference between simplicity and complex, is that once you start to explore a little bit more like what the culture is and how all of that food comes together, you have a greater appreciation of what these dishes really are.
Yeah. Yeah, that all comes from very simple dishes that have just been historically eaten by the people of all these different cultures.
Yeah. Well, great. That's it for this week's episode of Deconstructed. If you like this episode, be sure to give us a like and comment on iTunes. Podcast episodes can be found on Saturdays on iTunes. Peter's Recipe of the Week can be found on our blog at Mondays at nkrn.org/deconstructed. And we will also start having video episodes up on Wednesdays of us cooking the recipe of the week. As always, you can tweet us comments, questions, and complaints to us at DeconstructPod. And unlike Sam, you don't have to pack up your knives and go, but you can't stay here. Stay hungry.
Stay very, very hungry.
Deconstructed, the Top Chef podcast, is brought to you by the Nerdy Nights Network. For more great content, visit nkrn.org. Our theme music was brought to you by podcastthemes.com.